Don't worry. Be happy. No, really, I mean it. By this point in the course, you're probably completely dismayed. The Constitution doesn't protect you, big data can expose your secrets, and we've just learned that you can't even trust the chips in your computer to work properly. But the truth is that you really can protect yourself to a much greater degree than you probably do. How to go about that is the topic of today's lecture. You don't have to become perfectly invulnerable to protect yourself in cyberspace. The only real way to do that is to turn off your computer and use it as a paperweight, or maybe never buy a computer at all. But if you're listening to this course, that seems pretty unlikely. So what you really need to do is do a better job of reducing your own risks. If you improve your own security enough, that'll make the bad guys go looking for an easier mark. We call this the diversion effect. You know it from real life. Using the club on your car to lock your steering wheel doesn't prevent a break-in. Good car thieves can still defeat the club within a few minutes of effort. But in addition to being crooked, they're lazy and cautious. So rather than spend those minutes on your car, they just move to the next one down the line that doesn't have a club on it. We see the same thing in cyberspace. Here's an example. One tactic that some hackers use is called war driving. You can almost guess what it is from the name. They literally drive around in a car looking for open Wi-Fi networks. Sometimes they're just looking for free Wi-Fi access to piggyback on. But not infrequently, some use an open Wi-Fi network to hack into your personal computer. What they're particularly looking for are networks that are not encrypted. They can sometimes break Wi-Fi encryption, but it takes time and it's harder to do. So if you encrypt access to your wireless router by requiring a password, then the war drivers will just bypass your house and move on to your neighbor. So in this lecture, I'm going to give you some suggestions for how to make yourself safer in cyberspace. Now, one preliminary note before I begin. In a 30-minute lecture, I don't have the time to give you step-by-step instructions on how to implement these suggestions. But almost everything you need to know is on the web somewhere. If you want a password to protect your wireless system, for example, just go to Google and search for the instruction manual for your wireless router. It's all there. And if you still can't figure it out, find a 15-year-old in your family and ask them. I guarantee they can do the necessary technical work for you. So, what kind of steps can you take to make your cyber presence a harder nut to crack? First and foremost, keep in mind that cybersecurity is basically a human problem. The easiest place to make a change is right between your ears. A few simple changes in how you behave can go a long way to making you safer. Because, you see, almost all of the vulnerabilities in a network are exploited principally through human error. You need to recognize that access to your network is most easily achieved through some form of trickery, what we call social engineering. In fact, one of the most infamous hackers of all time, Kevin Mitnick, has said that he is nearly 100% successful in tricking people into giving him access to their systems. According to him, quote, "There is no Microsoft patch for stupidity, or rather, gullibility." One of the most famous, or perhaps infamous examples of this is a study recently completed by the US government, in which the testers left USB thumb drives on the ground in the parking lots outside of various federal office buildings. One would have expected, indeed hoped, that federal employees well-schooled in cybersecurity would know better than to plug an unknown USB drive into a government computer system. On the contrary, of those who picked them up, 60% plugged the devices into their computers in their office. We know this because the only thing on the drives was a program that reached out through the internet like a beacon and reported back, "I've been plugged in." Even worse, if the drive or CD case had an official logo on it, Something like the Great Seal of the United States with the eagle. Our well-trained, cyber-savvy government employees and contractors plugged in 90% of the bogus mobile media. I suppose that means that official logos make mobile media much safer. And of course, the employees are just like you and me. We're not likely to be any more cautious than they are, but we should be. So here's a good rule of thumb to keep in mind. If it's too good to be true, it's almost certainly too good to be true. Free thumb drives aren't free. And when you get an email that says it has a link to your favorite actor or actress in a compromising photo, don't click on the link. In 2012, the movie star whose online photos resulted in the most hacking attempts was Emma Watson, the young actress who played Hermione in the Harry Potter series and who grew up to become quite a beautiful young woman. Apparently, she appeals to a certain cyber demographic, and so she's a good way of attracting thoughtless clicks. Here's another vulnerability. Tragedy attracts sympathy. In the aftermath of a natural disaster, like, say, the 2010 earthquake in Haiti or Hurricane Sandy in 2012, lots of good people set up websites in order to collect money and goods through cyberspace. Malicious actors are attracted to money like moths to flame. A significant fraction of those sites are frauds. If you're going to give money to people in need, and you should because they need your help, go only to sites you know and have chosen yourself, like the American Red Cross. Don't click on links in random emails that come to your inbox. Similarly, most of the official-looking emails you do receive from your service provider or your bank are fake. Remember the term phishing with a PH? The text of those messages is the bait, and you, unfortunately, are supposed to be the fish. If Google sends you an email and says that you need to log into your account because they think it's been hacked, don't click on the link in the message. That's the link that hacks your account. And take a minute to turn off the auto run function on your computer. That way, if you do click on a dangerous link, the invading programs that are inside it won't start running automatically. So, the first and most important lesson is just one of education. Learn to practice good computer hygiene. Think before you click. That's not just a slogan. It's good practice. So, now let's talk passwords. If you're like me, you hate them. You want to make them hard to guess, but then they're hard to remember. And if you make them easy, then you make yourself an easy mark. And if you write them down on a sheet of paper, well then of course you'll lose the paper or someone will steal it. So what should you do? First, resist the temptation to go with easy passwords. I know that's easier said than done, but you really must. Your password's primary function isn't to protect you from some petty thief with a low IQ. Nowadays, cunningly designed computer programs are trolling the web for vulnerable accounts. Most password cracking programs have a huge dictionary of the top 500,000 passwords or so, and they just check those first. If yours is on that list, you're, well, the technical term is toast. Did you know that the most common password of all is password? And the second most common is 123456. Don't use those. But also, don't use obvious personal information, like your birthday either. If you were listening to the big data lecture, you know that can be found on the web pretty easily. And don't use common cultural reference points. Do you have any idea how many people use Muggle or Frodo or Bruce Springsteen as their passwords? So, what should you do? Well, first, you might consider a password safe. That's a program where you can store all of your passwords to various websites and such so that you and only you can find and use them when you need them. Then you protect that one program with a really strong password, a master password. It may be hard to remember, but since you won't need to worry about remembering all the others anymore, you can do it. Norton has a password safe program that it calls Identity Safe. Another good one is called LastPass. The difference is that Norton is on your laptop, while LastPass is a web-based program, which means that you can use it on any computer that is connected to the web. And how do you create a strong master password? Well, there are lots of tricks out there, but here's one that I use. Think of your favorite line from your favorite movie or play or book. Or if you prefer, think of the opening line of the last book you read, or the last 10 street names of streets you've lived on, something that you know. Then make a password from the first letter of the first 10 or 15 words in that movie line or of those street names. So to take a shorter example, if your favorite line in a movie was, "Here's looking at you, kid," from Casablanca, your password would be HLAYK. And then you can vary the capitalization, say every third letter is capitalized, and add in some numbers. Again, pick ones that only you might know, like the last 4 digits of your home phone number back from when you were just a child. You remember those, others don't know them. Throw in an asterisk just for fun, and in the end, your password might look like this: capital H, L-A, capital Y, little k, asterisk 0956. Perfectly sensible to you because you created it, but utter gibberish to anyone else. 3 final tips about passwords. First, for the passwords you use on websites and store in your vault, don't use the same password that you use for your master password. You don't want anyone to be able to find that all-important password in more than one place. In fact, don't make a habit of making all passwords the same. Have several different ones for different types of websites. They don't all have to be strong ones. You can use a really strong one, similar to the one we just created for your vault, but different in details, for your bank. But use a different, weaker password for the chat board where you just log in and talk about Civil War history. That way, if your Civil War site gets hacked, you don't lose your bank account too. And always, always, always use a different password at work than you do at home. So at least if your work password is cracked, you haven't given the hackers the key to your home computer. Second, if the information you're trying to protect is really important, consider using a password alternative, like a fingerprint scanner or a security token. That's expensive, but if you have a new patent coming out, maybe you should do it to protect your investment. And finally, if you do follow my advice and use a password safe, please, 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 make sure you pick a master password whose construction you will remember. Because if you hide all your passwords in a password safe and then forget the key to the safe, you've lost all your passwords. I've actually done that to myself, so trust me on this one. The results can be very, very painful. Now, good computer hygiene and good passwords are important, but they can only take you so far. As we saw with the Chinese hack of the RSA security company in Lecture 14, even the most sophisticated users can be fooled. The most effective attacks on a network often come as emails or files that look very much like the real thing. Even the corporate recruitment plan for the next year, or the directory document that looks like it comes from a corresponding organization, can have malicious software in it. Here, the best thing you can do to prevent those sorts of intrusions is to make sure that you have an effective set of firewall and intrusion detection systems. And so should everyone who connects to your system. And that's true whether it's all 3 of your kids' computers connected to your home system or the much larger system at your office. It costs money, but it is money well spent. Make sure that you get these systems, keep them up to date, and use them. Lots of people turn them off because they slow the system down. Don't. That's like not locking your front door, and it's just as ineffective. Now, some people think that they don't need a computer security system because their operating system that they use is immune. They're wrong. That's a frequent misconception of particularly Apple users. But Apple products aren't immune from hacking at all. They're just targeted less frequently because fewer people use them. That's the same reason that Willie Sutton robbed banks and not grocery stores, because banks were where most of the money was. But that's changing. As Apple products become more widely used, and especially as the demographic of Apple users continues to trend upscale, we are increasingly seeing efforts by hackers to attack the Apple operating system, often with real success. Mobile devices are also not immune. In fact, their protections are often weaker than those on laptops precisely because they've been less frequently targeted. Up until now, that is. Lately, we've seen an upsurge in hacking attacks on mobile devices. Like your laptop, they too can be turned into microphones by an outsider. And the hacker can even do it in a way that makes your phone look like it's still turned off. The only sure way to defeat that attack is to take the battery out of your phone, something I sometimes do if I think what I'm talking about is really sensitive. Of course, if you own an Apple iPhone, you can't take the battery out, so you have to leave the phone at home or outside the meeting room if you want to be 100% sure you aren't being taped. And here's a really scary bit of news, as if that wasn't enough. I recently saw the demonstration of a program known as PlaceRater that uses your mobile device to create a three-dimensional picture of your home and then ships the picture to an outsider. The program can construct a 3D representation of the interior of the house, perfect for robbers casing the joint, or for assassins. In some ways, though, this shouldn't be a problem for too long. Now that the vulnerability is known, we'll soon have patches to protect that particular vulnerability. To combat this sort of attack, you need to do the same thing as with your laptop. Get and use and keep up-to-date effective security programs on all of your devices. Another valuable way to protect your information is with encryption. As you recall from Lecture 14, encryption effectively turns your data into a secret code that nobody else can read without a key. And that solves a lot of security problems in one move. Let's put it this way. Who cares if the bad guys get into the house if everything you care about is locked up in the safe? So you want to be sure and put all of your sensitive data in your metaphorical computer safe. This is going to include your tax information, credit card numbers and bills, financial statements from your bank, your social security number, anything like that. And without being judgmental in the least, if you keep any bits of personal information about yourself that might be embarrassing or unfortunate if disclosed, then treat that information as sensitive too and put it in the safe. So, how do you encrypt your information? Well, obviously, you need an encryption program. There are plenty of good ones out there, but one that I like, because it's free and because the community that created it is pretty solidly committed to personal security, is called TrueCrypt. You can find it on the web and download it at no cost, but if it doesn't appeal to you, there are others out there. RoboForm, MyInfoSafe, and Privacy Drive are a few that also seem to work pretty well. What these programs will do is create an encrypted portion of your hard drive where you can store your sensitive data. The best ones use an interface that makes this encrypted segment look just like a directory in your Windows or Apple system. So basically, you open up this encrypted drive space, and then you drag and drop your data, your Word document or Excel spreadsheet or photo, or maybe the data file for your Quicken Books program. You drag and drop it into the encrypted drive space. And then when you close the drive, all that data is hidden by encryption. It becomes an unreadable ciphertext that can only be decrypted if you have the encryption key. Of course, to reopen the encrypted drive, you need a password that serves as your encryption key. But you've already learned how to create the right type of password. In the end, if you use a virtual encryption program on your hard drive, the data inside will be accessible only to you. And these programs really do work. Right now, as this lecture is being recorded, The FBI is struggling to decrypt a hard drive that they think has child pornography on it, and they simply can't do it. Any program with 256-bit encryption is, in today's world, virtually uncrackable. But remember, don't forget your password, because if you do, you won't be able to get your data back out of the safe. The flip side of keeping your data safe is that when you get rid of it and delete it, you really need to delete it. Many of us delete files by moving the icon to the recycle bin, or on Apple computers, the trash can, and think we're erasing the data. We're not. When you're done with some data and information and want to throw it away, you need to do so in a manner that is effective. You wouldn't throw your old checks into the garbage for someone to sift through, so why would you do that with your old electronic checks? Let's start with some basics. When you move a file to the recycle bin, all you've done is erase the pointer in the directory that tells the program, say Microsoft Word, where to go to pull up the file. That's a bit like throwing out the table of contents of a book. But of course, if you still have the rest of the book, you can find the chapter you're looking for anyway, even without a table of contents. Likewise, an intruder in your system who has access to the entire hard drive and is seeking to steal some intellectual property doesn't really need to know where the files are. It helps, of course, but with a little bit of time, he can find the original files themselves. So if you're deleting data, you need to use an eraser program that really erases the data. The one I use is actually called Eraser, but again, there are plenty of others on the market. What an eraser program does is find your sensitive data and then overwrite it with random gibberish. In effect, it shreds your data and randomizes it so that it can't be recreated. That eliminates the information for eternity. Now, if you're like me, sometimes you do delete data by mistake and want to be able to undelete it and put it back. So what I do is pretty simple. I put things I want to delete in my recycle bin, and then I tell the eraser program to erase that bin once a week. I figure that if I haven't gone back and gotten the data in a week, then I really don't need it. You can give yourself a month if you're forgetful, or do it every day if you're paranoid. But however you do it, if you use an eraser program, you can clean out your data permanently. Now, so far, we've been talking mostly about the devices you use and work on. Let's change the focus some and talk about what you do on the web. That is, what you can do about the information you put out on the internet for others to see. First, as with computer hygiene, start by paying attention to your own behavior. Don't go to dodgy websites. Don't post too much personal information on the web. And be careful what you say and do in public cyberspace, because it all gets recorded somewhere. One of my favorite stories from recent days is about how college students spend their Sunday mornings now. It seems that everyone goes out drinking and taking silly pictures on Saturday night and posts the photos to Facebook with all of their friends tagged, that is, identified by name. But most students are savvy enough today to realize that they need to manage how information about their conduct is shared on the web. And so they spend Sunday morning going through Facebook and untagging the photos. I suppose it might be easier not to go out and get drunk and do silly things in the first place, but they are, after all, college-age kids. At least they are more aware now of what is happening and are making an effort to control their cyberspace appearance. Another way to stay safe on the internet is to be careful how websites. There are two ways to access websites that are in common use today. One is HTTP, which stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. The other is HTTPS, where the S stands for secure. If you browse to a website using HTTPS, then your system automatically encrypts your transmission back and forth. Now, not all websites can accept HTTPS, but you should make that your default setting. I use a program called HTTPS Everywhere that basically says, if we can get there through the secure system, we will. If you install that program or one like it and turn it on, then when you use your system to browse the internet, at least you'll be trying to do it in as secure a manner as possible. Now, often, when you visit a website, the website leaves behind information on your computer. The good side of this is that the information, which is called a cookie for reasons I've never really understood, makes your next visit to the website go more quickly and easily. It helps the website remember who you are and what you're interested in. On the other hand, that can be a bad thing if you don't want people keeping track of you like that. I run a program called Cookie Cleaner once a month to wipe out my cookies. As a result, my browsing is a little slower, and the ads that get pushed to me aren't quite as well chosen, but that's a price I'm happy to pay for some privacy. Of course, cookies aren't the only way that your activities on the web are tracked. Remember the collusion program we talked about in the big data lecture, and how information about your browsing history is stored for everyone to see? If that disturbs you, then you can browse anonymously if you want to. Doing it that way is generally slower, but it can help you maintain your privacy. One of the best ways I know to do that is to use a program known as Tor, a free software program operated by the Tor Project at torproject.org. We talked about Tor briefly in Lecture 5, the one on identity and anonymity. You'll recall that Tor is an anonymizing tool used worldwide by journalists, human rights activists, hackers, law enforcement officers, and anyone else who wants to be anonymous online, even criminals. What Tor does is use cryptography to encrypt messages and internet traffic, so your request to, say, go to www.whitehouse.gov gets encrypted before it is passed along the web. In addition, Tor builds a volunteer network of servers around the globe to bounce encrypted traffic in a way that evades detection. For this reason, Tor is sometimes called an onion router. Each bounce adds a layer of obscurity and security to the message, and trying to get to the original source is like trying to peel back the layers of an onion to get to the center. It's almost impossible. If you use Tor software, you'll be able to conceal your originating IP address from discovery. Now lastly, take care in how you use and manage wireless connections at home and in public. At home, encrypt your wireless connections. It's easy to do and a great way to protect yourself from the war drivers I described at the outset of this lecture. And also, keep in mind that if you put your wireless router below ground, say in your basement, then the signals will go up into your house, but not out through the ground to the street. By contrast, a router in your attic is easy to see in the street. Simply moving your router can make it even harder to intercept your signal. Also, be careful what you do in public places, like the coffee house or the airport. Don't do any confidential private activity on unencrypted connections, like the connections at the Starbucks. Nearby network users on laptops and cell phones can use readily available programs to intercept your unencrypted wireless communications. So save all of your banking and bill paying for your encrypted home network, and use the Starbucks Wi-Fi to read your newspaper. In addition, turn off the automatic login function for your Wi-Fi antenna on your computer, as well as on your iPhone, Android, or iPad. When you log into a new Wi-Fi network, your computer will typically ask you if you want to remember that network. Say AT&T Wi-Fi, which is the one that's often at Starbucks, and log into it automatically the next time. Most people say yes, and they're happy to do so, since that means that when you come back to the Starbucks, you'll just automatically log into AT&T Wi-Fi without searching for it. But what happens when you're out on the street? Your device is always looking for a network named AT&T Wi-Fi. So if a bad actor is near you and broadcasts that network name, your stupid device will think it's found an old friend and invite it to check. And then the other fellow has access to your phone or your laptop. One of my cybersecurity friends says he tried this in the Pentagon cafeteria, and he got several dozen requests to connect, all of which he could have taken advantage of if he were inclined to do so. So the only networks you should tell your devices to remember are the personal ones you trust, and give them unusual names, not common ones like ATT or Linksys. There's no need to be promiscuous in your broadcasts. Will all this make you invulnerable? Absolutely not. Is it all free? Again, no. It costs money and takes some time and energy to implement effective personal security protocols. So let's be blunt. That's annoying. And it's one of the reasons that everyone systematically underinvests in cybersecurity. But in the end, underinvesting in cybersecurity is also fundamentally unwise. The steps we've talked about today aren't perfect, but they'll make you a less attractive target. In my book, that's worth the effort and the cost. So, in our next lecture, we'll look at some of the things that other people, service providers, for example, can likewise do to make cyberspace safer. I look forward to talking to you then.